Okay, so after conducting the compression test, I will now try and perform a leak test using this gauge right here. Okay, I got this from Shopee for, my memory serves me right, about 1,200 pesos, something like that. So in order to perform the leak test, we need to take out the fan shroud, as well as the fan clutch and this pulley right here, as well as this timing belt cover, as well as the valve cover. Okay, so taking out the fan shroud is very easy. It's just held by 4 bolts, 1, 2, and 2 on the other side. Okay, next thing that we'll do is we'll loosen the tension that drives this hydraulic pump. Okay, so basically we've got 3 bolts, 2 on this side and 1 here. Okay. Okay. So, we can move that now. Next, we will loosen the tension that drives the alternator. Okay. So, okay. Now we can begin to remove the clutch fan. It's held on by 4 10mm bolts. Now we can try to undo it by hand. Okay, so that's 1. That's 2. 3. Last one. Okay. Now we can take this out as well. So we now have room to access the crankshaft. The next thing that I will do is remove this timing belt cover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts. Okay. Okay, so now we can remove the valve cover. 12mm bolt. So now we have access to the valves. Okay, so the reason I had to do all that, because when conducting a leak test, we need to have access on the crankshaft right here. Okay, the crankshaft right here, we need to turn that, and we need to put it on top dead center with each cylinder that we're going to conduct a leak test with. So having the valve cover removed makes it much more easier for us to confirm and find out whether we really are on top dead center. Okay, so right now let me just try and briefly explain to you the concept behind performing a leak down test and the importance of trying to find top dead center for each cylinder that we're going to conduct a leak down test. Let's say, for example, on this cylinder number 1, because that refers to the piston stroke, wherein the piston is on the highest, meaning the top of the cylinder, and that both the intake as well the exhaust valves are closed. That way, when we introduce air through this glow plug hole, all these should be closed. However, be advised, there will always be leak, at least 10% to, at the very most, 15 or 20% leakage. There's no such thing as a perfectly sealed cylinder. There are always going to be leaks, because this is never a perfect seal, especially on the piston rings, but there are tolerances. It should only be within 10 to 15, not more than 20% leak. So basically the aim of performing a leak down test is, one, is to find out the percentage of leak or the amount of air that is leaking out. So if the air leaking out is beyond 20% and upwards, that tells us that we have a bad seal on the. And the number two purpose of performing a cylinder leak down test is to ascertain where the leak is coming from. So at the top dead center of cylinder number 1, both intake valves as well as the exhaust valves are closed. If we introduce air here, we would like to try to listen for air. Should we hear a considerable amount of leak, we should try to first listen for air leaking out of the exhaust manifold, the intake manifold, or the exhaust manifold, that is through the muffler, or the head gasket, and we can listen for air leaking out on that from the radiator. And if the radiator's got coolant or water, then the water should start to bubble, and that would indicate that we have a bad cylinder head gasket. In any event, if that is the case, if we are going to hear either a leak coming from the intake valve through the intake manifold, or the exhaust valve throughout the muffler, or the head gasket, then to some extent that's still good news, because we only need to take out the cylinder head. However, if we're going to hear the leak coming from this area right here, in this particular area above the cylinder head, that would tell us that the leak is coming through down this piston ring, through this cylinder sleeve, through the piston, down here, and upwards, up towards these oil holes. So if we're going to hear leaks coming from this direction, that would tell us that we have a bad seal on either the piston ring, the cylinder sleeve, or the piston itself, or a little of each. Okay, so now when it comes to finding top dead center for each cylinder concerned, we have a firing order of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so basically on your camshaft bracket, you've got a marking, should be lined up on here, and then just basically divide this bracket by 4, just count the number of teeth and divided it by 4. So if you rotate this and bring this teeth right here, tooth right here on this marking, that should bring us top dead center cylinder number 3, the firing order number 2. Okay, so this is cylinder number 3, this is the next in the firing order, and then you rotate it again, you bring this to this marking right here, you'll find yourself on top dead center on cylinder number 3 and number 4, and so on and so forth. Okay, so before we proceed to conduct a leak down test, this is my leak down tester, this is my compression test. I'm going to try to combine the two. So first I will perform a compression test, that is a manual compression test. I will just crank the engine. I will show you that. I changed the compression gauge. This is the original compression gauge. It goes up to 600 psi. This only goes up to at least about 100 psi. Well, it doesn't really need to go that much, because I'm just going to turn the crank and it's just a manual compression. As you can see, there's already air. I'll try to do that, and this is much more accurate because it's got an increment of every 10 psi, and every 10 psi is divided by 10, so it allows me for a much more accurate reading as opposed to this. So, and also I decided to make this so I can just use the adapter for the glow plug, so I don't have to use any of this. By the way, if you intend to buy this leak down tester, it won't fit on the 4D56. I retreaded this to, if I'm not mistaken, 1.25, 10 mm by 1.25 thread. So anyway, let's get to it. Okay, so this is how a leak down test is supposed to be carried out. You take your compressed air like so, just punch it in, And never mind this gauge, we'll focus our whole attention on this gauge right here. We'll set it up to 100, to 0. So this means 0 to 100. So if we're going to have a decrease by at least up to here, so that indicates we only have a 10% leakage, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll try to get it as accurate as possible. We'll bring it to 0. Okay. Okay, so I'll lock that in. It's on 0. Now just try to imagine that this thing has already been plugged into our glow plug hole on our engine cylinder number 1. Then we stick this one. Right now it's still on the closed position. We'll plug it in, so there's air. No air is still being introduced. So if I introduce air, so basically right now that's the amount of leakage that we're having, 100%. If I will try to close this pin down, it should be only about within this area 10 to maybe 15% leakage. Anything beyond 20, 30, 40 is already considered a bad leak. So basically our leak should only be at the very most 15% or maybe even 20%. Anything beyond 20 is already considered a bad leak. So if it falls down, we need to try to calibrate this again every time I close this reading should go back to 0 again in order for us to get a much more accurate reading. Okay, so now we've already got the Leakdown tester calibrated. As you can see, every time I let go of air and then I'll close it will go back to 0. So we are now correctly calibrated, so we can now tell exactly the percentage of air that is leaking. Okay, so now we're back at the engine bay. So this is what I was talking to you about. This is the cam sprocket. So this is your main marking. If you line this up with this right here, it's going to be a top dead center number 1. So basically I don't want that. We're now at the top dead center number 2. So if I'm going to crank this, bring it up to here, I'm going to perform as well a compression test on cylinder number 1, meaning the cylinder number 1 right now is on the bottom dead center that is going to go up on its compression stroke. So when this thing reaches right here, we're going to be at top dead center on cylinder number 1. I've already installed the glow plug adapter. Going to plug in our compression gauge. Okay, so I will bring this marking to here, and that will indicate us being on cylinder top dead center, cylinder number 1. Okay, so let's begin. 1, I'll try to be as consistent with it as possible. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, all the markings are lined up. This is the marking on the crank, and this is the marking on the camshaft sprocket. So that tells us we're on cylinder number 1, top dead center, and valves are fully closed. And this is the reading that I've got on our compression test, manual compression test on cylinder number 1. So it went up to 21 psi. So let's perform a leak down test now. Okay, so on our leak down test, I'll remove this. Okay, so 21 psi on our manual compression stroke. I will now install this. Okay, we have our leak down tester calibrated. Okay, so I've got the gauge calibrated to 0. I'm going to introduce air now. Let's just focus our attention on this gauge. I'll open this valve. So we've got a leakage of at least 39%. Do that again. 39%. Do that again. So 39%, do that again, at least 39%. Okay, so on cylinder number 3, I will do the same exact thing. I will perform a manual compression test first, like so, and then I will try to bring this marking all the way up to here. Okay, so I hope you can see that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it only gave us up to 18 psi. Okay, so cylinder number 3, leak down test. Produce air, 0, 25, 25. So let's just 25% leak down. Okay, so the cylinder number 4. 1, 2, 3. That's hard. 4. Okay, so it gave us 27 psi. Okay, so the leak down test on cylinder number 4 is 20%. Okay, so the cylinder number 2, the last cylinder in our firing order, I will bring this okay, all the way here. 1, oh that's light. 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so that gave us only 14 psi. Okay, so our leak down for cylinder number 2 is 22%, 27, 26. Okay, so 26%. So now for our wet test, I will do the same exact thing, but before proceeding, I will squirt oil inside here down our cylinder. 5 squirts of oil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Attach our compression gauge. And let's see if our results improve. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, that improved greatly. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that gave us at least 41 psi. So leak down. So it improved. So we're only now at, well, 11 started on 12%. So we're now at 14%. Okay, so I'll do the rest. I don't think I need to show you all that in order, just for brevity. I'll just show you the results. So I'll do that now. Okay, so the results are in. This refers to the result of our cranking compression test, that is cranking the engine with the aid of the starter motor with a battery. This is the manual compression test, only 1 compression stroke, and these are the results for the leak down test. This refers to cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So basically the results of the manual compression test as well as the leak down test basically confirm the results of the cranking compression test that I did. Cylinder number 4 gave us the highest PSI compression, 440 PSI. Again with the manual compression test, 27 PSI. The second is 21. Same with the cranking compression test. Okay, so on and so forth. And cylinder number 2 is the worst cylinder of all. Cranking compression test, it only gave up to 340 PSI. Manual compression test, it only gave 14 PSI, and even introducing oil inside the cylinder, it only gave 14 PSI. So this tells me that this cylinder, particularly the cylinder number 2, is not at all sealing in any way. As well as on the leak down test, however, cylinder number 4 is only a 20% leakage. However, cylinder number 1 gave us 39% leakage. But if you look at the result for the cylinder number 2, okay, on the leak down test, even though it gave us only 26% leak down test, even introducing oil, it still did not improve. So this tells me that this cylinder right here is not in any way at all sealing. It should be, our leakage percentage is should be only on the 10% range. So basically, even if number 4 cylinder is still in a way good, but we are aiming for a 10% leak down test. So anyway, performing all these tests eliminates guesswork, and I can now safely conclude that, well, basically my engine is has got a well, either a worn out piston ring or a worn out cylinder sleeve or a worn out piston. So particularly cylinder number 2. But so the next video that I will make is I will bring down the engine. Unfortunately, we have to do that. But anyway, I do believe that's it. If you like this video, please subscribe and like. Thank you for watching.